I work at a zoo. Entry number 1. I work at a zoo. It's not the type of zoo you're thinking of right now, though. I don't have the pleasure of working alongside tigers and bears and all that. My job is a little more unnatural. I run a semi-autonomous holding facility in the middle of the Mojave Desert. It was built by a company that doesn't exist and is run by a branch of the government you've never heard of. Technically, I don't even exist. I was killed in a single car crash about 6 years ago. My family was probably being notified of my demise right as the helicopter touched down in this god-forsaken place. The pay is incredible, though. A cool $200,000 a year for watching computer screens and pressing buttons every now and then. I also get a small hazard bonus when I help introduce a new prisoner, but I'll get to that. The prison I run doesn't hold people, it holds things. The type of thing most people will only see in their worst nightmares. You see, the government organization I work for exists to capture and hold anything that doesn't belong in the natural world. They started during World War II when soldiers started reporting mysterious disappearances and outright killings due to monsters. Naturally, the government decided the only thing they wanted killing soldiers was bullets, so they sent some super well-trained guys out to investigate. They ended up all getting killed out in some German forest, but the idea stuck around, and the Federal Department of Nothing was created. Back to where I work. The prison is underground, and the only way in that I have access to is a very conspicuous shed with a ladder inside. Once I'm inside, there's a full biometric smorgasbord of locks to get through that takes about 10 minutes. Not that anyone would be able to get down there anyways, what with all the landmines outside. It's actually pretty cozy from there. There's a nice set of living quarters, a huge kitchen that gets restocked by a drone every 2 months, and even a rec room with stuff like pinball machines and video games. I guess they don't want the one person with control of all these abominations getting bored. There are 1,024 cells that are all about 25 feet tall, with security varying from a glass door to a stupidly thick titanium bolt door. The prisoners tend to occupy the ones in the middle of the range, but at least I'm prepared. I have to check on them regularly to make sure there aren't any structural issues or giant demon horses running around. I technically have a level of personal protection that I'm supposed to bring with me, but I normally don't, if only because it takes a while to put on. They're organized into 4 corridors, numbered by the level of caution required by me when entering. Number 1 has creatures that are pretty much harmless. They might bite or scratch, but they aren't objectively dangerous. Number 2 has creatures that are kind of dangerous. They could kill me if I let them, but I could probably fight any of them off easily. I still bring a pistol just in case. Number 3 is where it starts to get bad. These guys could kill me in a fair fight. That's why I put on a bunch of ballistic armor and get a nice big gun out when I go in there. Number 4 is the worst. The creatures in there could kill me either before I could react, or without me being able to do anything about it. I don't even bother with the guns and armor in there because it wouldn't make much of a difference anyway. And they're super heavy. The monsters are actually kind of fun to talk about. There's a lot of them, so they can't all get a mention, but the ones I will talk about are real doozies anyways. They normally arrive in an unmanned cargo helicopter, and I have to open the cargo hatch in the roof of Corridor 1. Instead of building 4 doors above ground, I guess they decided it would just be easier for me to forklift everything around. From there, the documents attached to the mess of steel and cement tell me what it is and where it goes. I usually grab the forklift and put them in the closest open slot in their corridor. The transfer process is fairly simple. The cage plugs into the cell like a power socket and secures itself with electromagnets. I wish there was some big dramatic lever on the back that would open the door and release the beast, but it's just an inconspicuous little button. The door opens and the creature is forced into the cage somehow. I guess I've never seen the inside of one of them. Then I reset the doors, unplug the cage, and send it back up to the helicopter. I get an extra $50,000 every time I do this, but the only real risk is if I screw something up or decide I want to get up close and personal with a Wendigo. Oh right, the prisoners. Most of the scary ones are in Block 4 because they're not scary for nothing. I think the worst thing we have here is a skinwalker. A bunch of high school kids got slaughtered at some camp slasher style a couple years ago. The guys that went out there brought Skinny back. I just call him Skinny since it's shorter, and it's actually pretty apt. It just looks like a normal old man most of the time, but occasionally when I check on it, it's something straight from hell. Imagine a creature that looks like a wolf, but there's something off. Like the way its snout is constantly shifting in space like a projection, or the unnatural hue of its eyes. It just looks horrifying, and words really don't do it justice. It could easily rip me to shreds, but the scariest part is that it can talk. It talks to me through the camera in its cell. It likes to talk about my wife. Not that I've told it anything about her, or anything at all for that matter. Any form of contact between me and a creature is strictly forbidden. There are some good old-fashioned monsters here though. There's a werewolf that's actually the same one from that German forest that started this. It kept roaming around, but got hit by some random artillery and couldn't fight back when the next guys came. They kept it in a big pit over there. But when this place got built, it was the one to pop the champagne. An absolutely massive beast to be sure, but it's a lot less scary with all that metal in front of it. I am concerned about the claw marks though. They're starting to leave real impressions in the walls. Some of the level 1 guys are kind of interesting. There used to be a squonk, which is basically a little creature kind of like a gopher that's covered in warts and rough skin. It's completely harmless, but it cries a lot, and it's really sad in general. One day when I checked it, there was just a puddle where it had been sitting. I looked them up, and it turns out it probably cried himself to death and dissolved into the puddle. It sucks, but at least it's less work for me. There's also a hoop snake. It probably wouldn't be here if it weren't for the fact it had killed 4 people at a trailer park in New Mexico, since it's really just a snake. It looks like a rattlesnake, but it grabs its tail in its mouth and rolls like a hula hoop really fast. Apparently the venom is a lot worse too. Like die before you call 911 worse. Well, that's it for now. I need to get to sleep because I'm taking a delivery tomorrow. They don't tell me what's in the cage until I have it, so here's hoping it's a scary one. Entry number 2. This is bad. The monster I took yesterday was another skinwalker. It went in the cell fine, but today it's not there anymore. I don't know what happened. Maybe it tricked me somehow, and I don't remember. I've contacted my supervisor, and he said a containment team will be here in 2 days. I'm locked down in the living quarters. The living quarters are tough to get into during a lockdown, but is by no means impossible. Especially if the roaring I hear getting louder means that the werewolf managed to gouge a hole in his cell. I told my supervisor about the claw marks, but he just said not to worry about it. Well, I'm worrying. I don't know what animal the new skinwalker is, but it was much younger than Skinny. I don't think it could figure out how to open the cells, but there is a control room at the back of each block that has some exposed wiring and stuff that I've been told supplies electricity to the electromagnets. I guess all that's left to do is wait and see if anything comes through the door before the containment team shows up. Entry number 3. I woke up and saw a lion sitting in my doorway last night. It had a huge mane and had his lips pulled back in one of the most terrifying snarls I have ever seen. It didn't look right though. The fur looked flat and monotonous. The snarl looked kind of smudged, like its skin got rotated slightly on its face, and the eyes were not feline. They were human eyes, staring at me with all the contempt and hatred of someone who has every intention to kill you. I looked at my pistol on the table next to me, but it was too fast. It was on me before I could even think to reach for it. With impossible speed for a beast of that size, it seized my arm in its massive jaws and leveled its eyes 4 inches from mine. I knew then that it wasn't going to kill me. It was too smart to hesitate. It looked directly into my eyes for an eternity before releasing my arm and leaving with the same impossible speed it had surprised me with before. It was a warning. It was telling me to stay in here and not do anything to compromise its safety. Well, it's a little late for that because the team is getting here today. I know it can't take the whole team, but it can take a lot of them. If it managed to release any of the other monsters, the team won't stand a chance. I only told them that a skinwalker had gotten out, not that it had the potential to release more monsters. I guess we'll just wait and see. I lost my communications last night, probably thanks to my new friend. I've just been pacing back and forth all day trying to figure out what I can do. I'm just going to sit down and wait. Entry number 4. The whole team is dead. I heard the firefight from in here. These guys must have had some serious firepower because all I heard for 15 minutes was constant gunfire and explosions before it started to fade away, probably because there were less men shooting. I had a feeling this would happen. I don't know what to do now. I put the ballistic equipment on and loaded my machine gun, but I know how well guns work for the guys outside. I can only hope it decides I'm not worth its time while it continues whatever it's doing. It is doing something. I don't know what, but I can hear loud banging and weird groaning noises every once in a while. I would think it's trying to get out, but the door is wide open because the containment team destroyed it with a generous amount of explosives. I haven't seen it again, but I'm probably going to. If it can't figure out what it's doing, it's probably gonna make me do it. Entry numbered 5. They're both gone. Skinny and the new skinwalker, I mean. Apparently, it was all a big plan to break out of the prison. The young skinwalker got captured on purpose and somehow convinced me to just let it out. It probably used that stupid magic that got it this way in the first place. After the containment team got wiped out, it wandered around looking for a way to open the door. It came back for me. It dragged me over to the front of Skinny's cell and said one word in a voice so lacking in human inflection or emotion, it sends shivers down my spine, even writing this now. Open. That's when I figured all of this out. I looked at the control room at the back and said to try cutting the cables in there. Before I could say to only cut the cables that go to this cell, it ran down the corridor with its ridiculous speed and sliced every wire clean in half with a single smooth motion of its paw. I would say all hell broke loose, but that's a bit of an understatement. The skinwalker was the first to realize what had happened and was back at the cell before I could blink. Then the room came to life. Every creature in here rushed towards the gate connecting to the main corridor. As they ran, they were biting, kicking, and scratching at each other mercilessly. By the time the mass of death and fury neared the gate, several of them were bleeding to death or already dead on the ground. The only two left to reach the gate were the werewolf and a chupacabra. Chupacabras aren't really what people think they are. All the stories describe them as a wild dog that just likes blood. In reality, they're more like a coyote with 8 long spider legs. They have razor-sharp claws at the end, and they're almost as fast as the skinwalker was. They don't like blood. They need it. The two abominations reached the gate and turned to face each other. The werewolf let out a deafening roar of fury, and the chupacabra started shrieking. I thought they were yelling at each other, but then the werewolf slumped to the ground, and the chupacabra followed suit, its shrieking getting louder and louder until cutting off suddenly. I watched in horror as the skinwalker strutted back towards us with blood dripping from its permanent snarl. The beast tugged on the handle to the door, and it gave away with ease, revealing a wolf half the size of the beast sitting calmly in the center of the room. The two exchanged a single glance before I felt a sudden pressure in my chest, and I realized I was in the air. I hit the wall opposite the gate hard enough to break at least a few ribs, if not something more serious. They both stared at me with an emotion in their eyes I couldn't discern and made a break for the gate. The lion was noticeably slower than before, but it was probably just keeping pace with Skinny. The gate was no match for the beasts, and by the time I finally remembered to breathe, they were gone. After throwing up out of fear, relief and pain combined. I pulled off my ballistic gear there in the corridor and struggled my way back to the office to see if I could get the word out that the team had been slaughtered and 2 skinwalkers were free. I was right about the broken ribs, and I got a concussion on top of that. The communications were still down, so I did the only thing I could. I turned on the TV and waited for them to realize the first teen never came back.